I want to ask you, I just want to talk about Jalen Johnson. Can we just talk about Jalen Johnson for a little bit, please?
God, I was so glad you brought him up. I'm so glad you brought Jalen.
Go ahead. Cook.
Okay. So, Jalen Johnson. This is a dude that
he plays for the Atlanta Hawks, by the way, if people are wondering who we're talking about. Came on in the playoffs last year, now is in the starting lineup, and Cody's going to tell you how he reminds me a little bit of a modern Robert Horry. Go ahead.
That's
like that
nice,
one? Yeah.
That's a really nice one.
Yeah.
So I think what's really interesting about him is he still watches roll out on the court, and that is his role, is he sets a lot of screens, and he rolls a lot. But now something he's getting it a little bit more, that three-point shot, Ben, you can trust it a little bit more. You actually have to go out and cover it, right? He's going to be a weapon out there. Also, you close out on him, he can put the ball on the floor for a couple of dribbles. You know, he's not going to like blow through any kind of defense and cause any kind of craziness that way, but he can take a couple of dribbles and make a nice little pass once in a while. It's just a little bit more of an expanded role. Along with Ben, I think the thing that's almost impressing me the most is defensively. He just looks like he belongs. Like, you have Clint Capella going out and maybe like hedging against a pick and roll or something. Jalen Johnson slots down by the rim. They don't lose any size. They don't lose any vertical athleticism. And when I see him making those kinds of plays, I'm immediately like, wow, bring me the playoffs now, because this guy's not going to get punked out there. Like, this is a dude that, especially with a team that needs a little bit more coverage with somebody like Trae Young, where you have a lot of these rangier defensive players, he fits in really nicely with that system they have. And, you know, he's just a guy that can play 30 minutes a game now. He went from whatever it was, 15 minutes a game, and he can consistently play 30 minutes, and I trust him.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things you asked me at the top. What do I look at? Sometimes the coaches trust and just looking at minutes per game increase on a team that's competitive. Why is a competitive team suddenly playing a guy that played 10 minutes a game last year, 35 minutes a game? That kind of question, right? And sometimes you look at it and it's a massive master roster hole and they need somebody to fill in. But in this case, the Hawks have been pretty competitive to start the year. The Hawks have actually kind of been good. Let's call a spade after the first 11 or 12 games. They've been pretty good in Atlanta. And Jalen Johnson last year played 15 minutes a game. He had this moment at the end of the year I think it was the play-in tournament and maybe a little bit in the Celtics series where he had this unbelievable rebounding and offensive rebounding. I think it was in the play-in game. He had a bunch of offensive rebounds down the stretch and just looked great physically. But he looks even better physically this year, like a little weight room action in the offseason, you know, having the protein powder. He's been taking his supplements. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Some fish oils, some creatine.
So they're getting the creatine in the system. Yeah. So 30 minutes a game. He's averaging 15 points a game, 8 rebounds, 2 assists. He's shooting 47% from three. Now, he's only taken a handful of threes. He's not going to be a great volume three-point shooter. But I think we brought him up in one of our summer episodes about players to look for improving. The thing that is really getting to me here, Cody, is like his shot looks like it could be an okay NBA shot, and I did not see that happening. And so now you've got a guy who could be a really good defender, really active body. Like you said, he can roll to the basket and play as a screener, but he can also pop. He can cut and crash well. And then this is the Robert Horry part. And he's never probably going to be the spacer and shooter that Robert Horry was. But the most underrated thing about Robert Horry to me, who was probably an underrated player to begin with, he's a really good player for a long time, this extra passing. He's not the primary guy, but he makes smart passes. Top of the key, the ball hits him, entry pass to a cutter, or in the short roll situation or in transition or whatever it is. So you put all that together, and it's like, yeah, there's a reason he's starting and playing 30-plus minutes for a really good team, because he's like a really solid all-around player right now, and last year was basically an afterthought for most of the season.
I'm interested in this. I need to deep dive this a little bit more. I was looking at the team stats right now, and I'm pretty shocked to see that Atlanta's defense is actually worse than league average. I'd probably need to parse that out to see the Trae Young effect on that, because when I look out and I see a lineup that has DeJounte Murray, it's Clint Capella, Jalen Johnson, Onyeka Okongwu, I'm like, hey, these are some good defensive players. They should be pretty solid out there. This is a little besides the point, but I am interested with Jalen Johnson. Like you said, he hit the weight room. He's solid out there and he's still athletic. I'm always interested with guys like that in how much muscle he actually wants to put on at this point, right? Because he's built like he's a dude out there right now, right? Like like I said, he's not getting punked in the paint at any point. But like, how much bigger does he actually want to get? Because the other thing I really like about him is just how fluid of an athlete he is. Like, he's one of these guys that just floats around the court and can all of a sudden get vertical and block you, can sprint down the court as a big man, can go down and guard threes sometimes too. So, I don't know. I think that's going to be a really interesting thing going forward. I think the Anthony Davis of it all, when he put on a lot of weight and we were like, oh, maybe we need to bring it back a little bit, the Tim Duncan sort of workout routine. So I'm interested to see how Jalen Johnson's just like physicality changes throughout the years. But I love what he's looking like right now. I really do.
Yeah, it's not a Trae Young thing, it's not a Jalen Johnson thing. When Jalen Johnson's on the court, the Hawks defensive rating is in the 80th percentile in the league. So they've been very successful with him. And that's another thing I look for with these like young and up and coming players. Very small sample so far, but it is always nice to see that positive on-court value. Like when you're on the floor, your team does really well. In the case of Jalen Johnson early in the year, when he goes to the bench, Hawks don't do as well. Cody, when he's on the court with Trae Young, they have a 108 defensive rating. When he's off the court, when Trae Young's off the court and Jalen Johnson's out there, the Hawks have a 108 defensive rating. So this will not be pinned on Jalen on my watch. How about that?
Okay. No, yeah. I was wondering if it should be pinned on Trae, but I like that on-off without Trae Young. So that matches what I was seeing, because whenever I watched them play and he was on the court, I'm like, this is a solid defense. What's going on here? So I think it's probably safe to say that he's going to be coming up later in our conversation.
Thanks for listening. You can find the full episode of This Thinking Basketball podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy podcasts.